Hi, my name is Tim. I'm Senior Application Specialist at ATRsoft. In today's webinar, we will have a look at retrieving data from an external data source into custom tools and the SolidWorks document properties. This is a slightly technical webinar where I will show you how to set this up and explain a bit more in depth about how this is working. We already did a few webinars about feeding in external data, so make sure to view or review those. These are integrating your ERP to SolidWorks and managing your lookup lists. My wingman, the relaxed sales manager, Mr. Francois Simon, said that he had a better place to be, so I'm all alone today. This means that you can type in questions in the chat box and I will answer them right after the session. I expect the webinar to take somewhere in the range of 30 minutes. The webinar is being recorded and made available online later on. Okay, let's get started. So we have some different ways of using lookup lists in custom tools. We can use the basic lookup list, the included dictionary, or by using an external data source. I already covered some of this as use cases in previous webinar, and this time I will take you to a deep and dark place and show you how to set this up. I want you to know upfront, if you are a fan of the technical stuff, then this is for you. If you do not want to spend 30 minutes on configuration of the system, then our past webinars is more likely what you want to spend your time on. And let me show you where these are found. So in our web page, you go to the webinars, and in here you can see the upcoming ones. This is the one we are doing right now. And the past webinars are in the past webinar section. And in here you should have a look at this integrating your ERP to SolidWorks and also the managing your lookup list. So these two is a behind the scenes what we are doing today of those two. In this webinar, I will show you how to connect and read data from Excel, from SQL database, and from Access database. I'll also show you how I made one of the lookup lists from the Managing Your Lookup List webinar. This is going to make me jump from SolidWorks to Custom Tools Administration and other required applications to cover this in full. I will try to keep a steady pace to let you fully understand what I do. If and when you try this out for yourselves, always keep in mind that this webinar is recorded and you can use it as a resource for later. Okay, let's have a look in SolidWorks. So basically, if I open up a new part, that's pretty slow today. If I open up this one, we can define our lookup lists from in here. So this is what we do in the user interface. As I mentioned, we have done this webinar previously. I added some extra stuff to this. The simple list can be defined directly within custom tools. These values are typed in the custom tools options and retrieved from our custom tools database. If you are using an external lookup, you can use what we refer to as key value list. So a key value list is where you pick a known value or one value, in this case, for instance, laser cut, and then we return one additional value. And in this case, it's export as DXF. If it was for machining, I would export as step file. If it was anything else, no export needed. A key value list is also really good when it comes to populating a lot of data into our properties. So for instance, if I know a customer name, ATRsoft, then we can automatically retrieve the street address, the city, and so on, as well as contact information. But in this use case, let me just reset those two. I want to have a look at how we can read data from an external database. And we did that as well in the earlier recording. This is looking up for data in an external database. Actually, it's not an external database. It's just Custom Tools database itself, looking at properties in our dictionary. And I will show you this in a few minutes, how we are retrieving these values from our database. But for this one, I want to focus on Excel, SQL, and Access. So this is how it looks when you are retrieving values from an external data source. And essentially it's the same. It really doesn't matter if it's Access, SQL, or Excel. The user interface will behave the same way. So we add a button to make the lookup. We can run a search and then find whatever we want in our list. So this is just face milling from my toolcrypt to my manufacturing department. And if I want to import one of these, I can select copy or link. Copy will place this line of text into my properties, and I can then edit them if I want to. If I link, then it's tied to that line in that database. So if anything is changed in the database, then the values in my SolidWorks file is going to be updated accordingly. So if I link this in, you can see that I picked the 80mm face mill, and I got the body diameter, number of inserts, and the XY feed rate. If I look at SQL query, it's exactly the same user interface. I have a search interface where I can search for anything. I can even narrow it down and search for SOL, and that would return SolidWorks. So it's a searchable list we have in here. Where is a linked value a good thing? Well, SolidWorks recently changed to all uppercase. So imagine we were using SolidWorks as vendor previously, and we had this in our files. Then we would have to open up all our files manually and then edit this property to be all capital. By using a linked value, the properties will always be as they should. For the Excel, there's quite a lot of data in this one actually. I have a lot of lines. So all of this info is typed in an offsite data source. Someone else is managing that. Maybe other departments of our company are utilizing the same data. So we are retrieving that data directly into SolidWorks. So how is this all configured? Well, we need to start at a slightly different place. Let me just go ahead and actually save this file first. Okay. We need to define this in our Custom Tools Administration interface. Now, I'm connected to a database called Custom Tools. The database under that I'm using is called Link to External. This is where my profile is located. In this one, we have a node called External Databases. If I select that one, I'm then able to add or modify the data sources that I have. So for instance, I'm using materials. This is the Excel file that I just showed you at the end. This is where we have all the information about our material items, description 1, 2, and the unit. If I bring this up, you can see we have item description, description 2, and unit. So this is where I want to retrieve my data from. How to set this up? Well, you just add a new entry point. And the name is arbitrary. You can call it anything you like. So I'll call it demo. The provider is basically, you need to figure out what you are going to need. But a help could be that Microsoft Office 12 is going to work fine for Excel files. If you have a MDB file, you can use the JET4 database. And if you are using an SQL database, you can use any of the server native or whatnot for that. If you pick the wrong one, you will get an error that connection did not work out, and you can then try a different one. But basically, you should go for Office 12 or the SQL ones. So the data source is where our data is located. As you can see in this image, I have C program data, ATR soft, custom tools, material items. This is a file path. If I have a database connection, I need to define the server and the database instance. So you need to figure out what kind of data you're trying to retrieve here. But if I want to have this one created, then I'm just going to open up the location where I have my Excel file. And there are many ways you can do this. You can copy that one and just do like that. So now we have the full path. Now, for some reason, it's not always working on my system, but if you press Shift and right mouse, now it's working, you actually have an option to copy as a path. Then you can copy the string as a path instead. That's more easy. But now you can insert this as the data source. For Excel files, you need to add a provider string, and that's called Excel 12.0. This is just something that you need to know, and now I told you, so now you know. And then you can hit OK, and this is going to be added as a point we can retrieve data from. So that's basically it from the admin point of view. Now you can continue in the admin user interface and just open up the profile. In most cases, I would actually recommend doing that, but for this webinar, I'm going to do something else because else I cannot show both windows at the same time. But you need to go into database search groups and continue working there. But let's just leave it at this window and then go back to SolidWorks and have a look at the options in here. So we need to go into the database search group. This is step number 2. First item is to create the connection point. Next is to tell what we are trying to retrieve from our data point. So I can add a new data entry, and this is why I want to have both windows open, because now you can see that I have materials. This is this one, tool library, PDM, assembly lookup, and so on. So anything I have defined in my admin interface is going to be available inside my profile options. So in this case, I want to create a new point. So it's called, let's call it webinar, or just web. I want to retrieve data from the database point that I just created. That was the demo. So I'm going to expand that one, and I can see that I have one database available underneath. And the database is actually my Excel file. So this guy is my database. I can then further expand this one, and then I have 5 different resources where I can return data from. It's called Sheet 1, Quote, Quote 2, Project, and Project 2. And as you might have guessed already, this corresponds to the pages or the sheets that I have in my Excel file, of course. So I can have many sheets of data in the same Excel file and retrieve from each and individual sheet if I want to. Now, the Excel file has to be formatted in a special way, you could say. The first row must contain your headers. We always look at the first row and return these as our headers. Note the descriptions. It's called item, desk 1, desk 2, and unit. You will see those in a few minutes. And also we need to have a unique identifier per row we have. So in this case, the unique ID is my item. So there are no 2 items with the same name. It has to be unique values throughout. All of this can be exactly the same, as you can see, but we need to have at least one column with unique IDs. So I want to return information from my sheet number 1, and now we read in the column headers, as I just told you. The item is the unique value. So this is what I'm going to pick as the key column. Then we need to define what's called a quoting identifier. And if you do not do this, it might not work. So a good hint is to press the question mark when you see something you are in doubt about. And in here we have the quoting identifier described. Square brackets are used with Microsoft SQL Server and Microsoft Excel. Quotation marks are used with Oracle Server. Okay, so knowing that, I now know that I need to use my square brackets. So I will select that. To update properties dynamically, if the source is changed, we need to enable updating of linked properties. But in order to enable that one, we actually need to install a custom tools server service as well. And I do recommend doing that where you have your database installed, for instance. So if you do not have that already, you just go into your installer file or your installation and modify it, and then add the custom tools server service. But that is a requirement if you want to be working with linked properties that are updated if the source is changed. But that's basically it. Now I have set what I want, where I want to retrieve data from, and what the key column is. So I can hit OK, and now I can start building up my list to use in the user interface. So this is what I'm going to do now. Creating this is really straightforward. If I want to create a new lookup for that demo that I just did, I just go ahead and add a new property. And the attribute name is what we put into our SolidWorks document. So I'm going to call it web demo, for instance. This is going into my SolidWorks document properties as the attribute. The user interface, we need a label, so that could be for demo purpose. And then this is what the user will see in the property panel, and this is what we are going to write into our SolidWorks document properties. Now we need to have an edit box to open the connection to the database. And this is done by using edit box and then button function get database item. This is true for the first item that you want to pick. So in this case, I want to pick from my web that I just created the item. So in web, the item is the key column, and now I return that into my user interface. I'm not going to do that because I already defined everything. But there are other values that I would like to get. Now, this one is what I'm getting right now. I would also like to get description 1 and 2 and the unit based on the item. So we are going to look down and find, well, this is the item I picked, then return these values as well. This is done by simply adding another edit box. Do not define any button function because that's already established. And then from the database search group, we want description 1. We also want description 2 and the unit. And it's exactly the same throughout everything. If it's an SQL or if it's an Access lookup, it's the same steps to do it. First, we create the button in the interface. That's done by edit box. And then get database item, and then what database to open and which column to return. And when that's done, we can then start building in what else we need. So this is going to look something like this. For the list type, I'm going to select Excel. Now I want to insert a new item in this one. So this should be maybe called demo. Let's see if I have any. Okay, I have no results for demo. So that means it does not exist in my Excel file. So I'm going to go to the end and add a demo. Now demo is a unique key, so I personally favor adding in a number or something so I can add demo 0, 0, 2, and 3 and so on. But that's it, I don't need to do anything else. Now I added a new product or item to my list. It's called demo 001. So when I go back to SolidWorks and run the search, I can now select this item. Because we are doing this live, we are searching in this Excel file or the SQL or the Access database as a live search. So that done, I can now create a link to that property. There is no description, description 1 or 2, or no unit defined. So maybe I want to correct that at some point. Maybe some manager is going to correct that. But right now I'm just connected to this item, and this is all I need. So I'm going to hit OK and save that. I'm going to close SolidWorks. So now I want to add description 1, description 2, and a unit. So these are my descriptions. Webinar is cool. I'm going to save my source file, and then I actually need to wait until this server service is going to update and reread the source. Now this is actually set as a default at 100 minutes, so I'm not going to just sit and wait for 100 minutes, so I have manually edited the time for the refresh in SQL Server. So it should actually be updated right now. But let's have a look. I'm going to start up SolidWorks again. If it's not working, I need to kill the process and just restart it. Let's see. Okay, so let's open up this document again. It's document 24. And when I open the properties, they should be updated accordingly with the new properties. So crossed fingers. And now we actually added in these additional values without use of doing anything. So that's taken care of, and it's working. Really nice. Let's go back to PowerPoint. We can also do lookups directly from inside custom tools and into an SQL database. This is done by adding an SQL query. I showed this in the lookup list webinar, but I didn't really show how it was done and how to set it up. So I wanted to do that as well today, now that we are in the dark side, looking in properties and settings and so on. So to use that, create a new file. And for the list type, it's a database. So this was what I used in that webinar. All of this data comes from an SQL database, but I didn't define any entry points. I didn't connect to an external database or anything. This was done directly with a lookup list. So in my lookup list, the one in use is the dictionary. And this is actually just dumping in an SQL query, which is looking up at the connected database, looking for dictionary value where the language ID is 1033. And I can test the SQL query and see that it's working. So this is what I get from my database. To use this and insert it into the user interface, you need to go to Model Properties and add an combo box. At least if you want to be able to type in as well, it should be an editable combo box, but combo box is the least. And then you go next, 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 and then you just select the lookup list that you would like to use, in this case my dictionary, and everything is taken care of from that point on. So really simple way of reusing the same data across many platforms, but setting up with the SQL script is a bit more work because you need to know a lot more about SQL, and also it might be an issue if you need to connect with different credentials and so on. So things to understand in that regard, of course. Okay, so back to PowerPoint. Just a recap of what we saw in the webinar. We need to define the connection to our data source as the very first point. So that means opening up the custom tools administration, navigating to the external databases, and then add new, and then define the data source. Then we go into the profile properties, and here we define the database search group. And this means that we are telling where we want to retrieve data from and which column is the key column. So a lot of points in that single picture there, but I want to emphasize that if you're going to use the update of properties from the source automatically, then you need to set the enable updating of linked custom properties at the item number 9. Plus, you need to have the custom tools server service installed, and I recommend doing that where you have your custom tools database installed. And then you need to define the properties for the external lookup following pretty simple steps. You need to add an attribute, define to get the database item. So here we define a new attribute. We go and define that we need to open up the database and fetch the item in this case. And if you want to have the linked values that are belonging to the item, then you just go for the first image, ignore that one because we have already established the connection, so nothing should be defined for that one. And then you select Excel and then description 2, 1, so on. So the clear reason for using this approach is that your systems are connected with each other, meaning that data is a lot more easy because you have only one place to deal with it. Everyone is going to pool the same data, and this makes the entire business logic uniform and makes any downstream work a lot more easy to carry out. Spending less time on typing values, which was already typed by someone else in a different system, will bring more time to be creative as a designer and remove the non-value hours from your projects. So in short, just fill the gap between you and the technology. This was all I had for you today. If you would like to have a copy of this profile used here, just let me know and I will make sure that you get it. Setting this up is 100% possible on your own, but I'm sure that your reseller will be happy to realize your dreams as well. I'm going to be open for questions when the recording is stopped, but first I want to thank you all for attending this webinar, and I hope to see all of you for the next one. We will be looking at SolidWorks configurations and how to work with those from a properties and drawing perspective. Thank you and have a nice day. We are in the life-saving business. We kill your routines before they kill you.